different individuals who will be speaking to us about Common Core. The way the format will work is we're giving each of them 15 to 20 minutes to speak each. We have Michelle Udall, who will be speaking first. She is actually you knew that, right? Okay. Michelle Udall was elected to the school board of the Mesa Public Schools in 2010 and has worked extensively with the Common Core curriculum and is very familiar with it. And so she will give us her perspective on it. We also have Lori Nielsen, who will be speaking in conjunction with Michelle. And Lori just recently completed her second master's degree in administration. And a lot of the classes that she recently took had to do with Common Core. So we will turn the time over to Michelle and to Lori, and then after that, I will introduce Diane Douglas. Okay. At the end of their presentation, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions of the presenters.
Is someone paying attention to time so I know when to stop for?
I'll be keeping track.
Okay, so can you give me
when you see me start walking towards the front of the room, that means your time's almost up.
Okay, sounds good. All right. I feel like I'm looking at the wall. I am really grateful for this opportunity to come and talk to you guys today. Common Core is something I've done a lot of research on. As a school board member, it's something that's very important to me that we make sure we get right. And so it's something I've done a lot of work on and have looked into quite significantly. One of the things I want to preface this with is that I do like what's in the Common Core. I have researched them fairly extensively, and I do like the standards as they are. I feel like they are the best standards out there. Having looked at several other sets of standards, I feel like that they are the best thing available. What I do not like is the federal government's involvement. And they actually were not involved in writing these standards. However, the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, should never have been involved in this in any way, and they should not be pushing it as they are. As you may or may not be aware, there are states that decided not to. This is not a mandatory thing, but they did wave the carrot. So there are states that did it because the carrot was waved, but there are states like Arizona that had already planned on implementing it long before the Department of Ed got involved. Arizona was actually one of the original states that formed this coalition to create the Common Core state standards and has been involved from day one. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the federal government involvement. I feel like there is a way to do Common Core standards and work on getting the federal government out of things. One of the bills, I was recently with the National School Board Association, and one of the bills that they have presented to different representatives on the federal level is what's called the it's the Local Education Agency Governance, Flexibility, and Efficiency Act of 2013. And this is a bill that would really stop the Department of Ed from putting waivers and grant conditions and things like that without authority from Congress. We all know that they have no authority to be doing any of those things, and yet they're doing it anyway. And this would put legislation in place that would absolutely not allow them to do those things. And so I think that that's important that we talk to our representatives about this act, and I will leave information, I only have the one, so if you want to come ask me about that, I can give you I can tell you a little bit about where you can look up that information. And it's called the Local Education Agency Governance, Flexibility, and Efficiency Act of 2013. Sorry, it's really long. Local Education Agency Governance, Flexibility, and Efficiency Act of 2013. And its purpose is exactly to get the Department of Ed out of making these grant conditions and waivers and waving the carrot, as we all know they've been doing.
And that's a federal bill that's going
Yes. And so it's waiting. It needs more co-sponsors in the Senate. It has signers and co-sponsors in the House, but they need more signers in the Senate. So, but it could use more signers in both the House and the Senate.
And it is purposely to get the Department of Education out?
That is the whole point of the bill. And so if you want to come read it, I have the text of the entire bill up here. That's federal. That's on the federal level. Okay. So I just want to preface with that. I do not believe the federal government should be in any way involved in telling us what standards we should be following. Having said that, I've read the state standards, and I really believe that they are the best thing out there. So let me tell you a little bit about what's in them. So imagine that you were in charge of writing the standards for third grade English language arts. What would you put in them? I'm just going to take, we might as well make this fun. Just somebody yell out something you would put in them. Third grade, this is 8-year-olds learning English.
Good extensive phonics.
Okay. Phonics. This is the first time that phonics has been in the state standard. This is the phonics chart in the standards. I have brought our copy. This is the MESA's standards. Phonics is actually required for the first time in our state standard. I think it's the first time in our state standards. That doesn't mean we haven't been teaching phonics for years and years. In MESA, we've taught it for many, many years. First time that phonics is actually I think it's the first time it's actually written into the standards, required. Anything else?
Trade books instead of Dick and Jane type stuff.
Trade books, what do you mean by
Trade
that?
books,
I don't know what that
stories
means.
that are written by real authors.
Okay.
University.
Right.
With
And let me find that. It's in here too. Okay, let me find the reading fiction. I lost that tab.
Well, I like things
It's in there.
along with that, with moral things that kids can talk about and have discussions and reading them. Yeah.
Okay, and I do have that. Okay, one of the things is talking about respect, and actually respect and listening to others, speaking in the time, and showing respect to your elders and others in the standards.
Poetry recitation.
Poetry. Let me find that one. Oh, where is it? Okay, wait. I have to find the. Sorry, I made little tabs because I guessed what you guys might be saying. These are my best guesses because it's what I would want. Well, that's writing poetry. Okay, wait. Oh. Okay, come up after. I'll show it. I'll find it for you because it's in there. Poetry, reading, and recitations.
Persuasive writing?
Persuasive writing. Okay, we're talking third grade. Let me read you persuasive writing. No, that's the. Okay, provide reasons that support the opinion. Okay, so introduce a topic or text they're writing about, state an opinion, and create an organizational structure that lists reasons. Provide reasons that support the opinion. Use linking words and phrases. Conduct a concluding statement of arguments. In there. Anything else?
Parts of speech.
Parts of speech. Demonstrate command of the conventions of standard English grammar and usage when writing or speaking. Explain the functions of nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs in general or their functions. Goes on and on for this entire page about the parts of speech.
Home economics of shop.
In third grade English? Sorry, that's not in the third grade English requirement. Way back there, okay. I thought, yeah.
Punctuation and grammar.
Punctuation and grammar. That one is, okay, let me find that one. Okay. Some of my tabs fell off, sorry. It's right here. Well, that's spelling. Okay, sorry, that's one of the tabs that fell off. It's in there also. Acquire, wait, no, that one's vocabulary. Sorry. It's right. Demonstrate command of the conventions of standard English capitalization, punctuations, and spelling when writing. Capitalize appropriate words in titles, use commas and addresses. Okay, it goes on and on. Okay, I think we're getting the point. And I have a whole bunch of these over here. Afterwards, I would be happy to let you look through these. They have everything that I would put in them if I wanted them. And they're written for that purpose precisely.
How did these change when they moved to junior high and high school?
Okay, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, okay? So when I look at these standards, no, I don't want the federal government involved. I want them out of this completely. However, these are the best standards I've seen. They are back to basics. They include phonics. They include persuasive writing starting in 3rd grade. Actually, I think it might even start before then. But by 3rd grade at least, they're doing persuasive writing. Okay, let's look at the 9th and 10th grade. This is 9th and 10th grade English language arts. And I'm just going to read a couple things from this one. Things that really stick out to me, that are really important to me. One of the things I really don't like about high school is how many textbooks they read and how liberal of a slant there can be in textbooks. So although this is English language arts, they are expected to use some of that reading that's required in this from different subject areas. So one of the requirements in here is to analyze seminal U.S. documents of history and literary significance. So, and it gives some examples of some different ones: Washington's farewell address, the Gettysburg Address, and it goes on. But these are examples. You can use whichever ones you want. So one of the requirements in the English language arts is to read the actual document from American history and learn to analyze it and understand it. So I think you guys are get the idea. I feel like as conservatives, when I read through this, we won. I feel like it has in it what I want to be in it. I feel like it requires them. Oh, there's one. Sorry. There's one other thing.
There will be another question and answer
Yeah, that's
session
fine.
afterwards.
There's one other thing I wanted to read that I think is one of my favorite things about this. When they have to be able to identify the difference between primary and secondary source documents. So are you reading the actual document, or are you reading someone's opinion about that document or that source? So one of the things it requires is to delineate and evaluate the argument and specific claims in a text, assessing whether the reasoning is valid and the evidence is relevant and sufficient, identify false statements and fallacious reasoning. Is that not the most important things our kids could be learning in English language arts in high school? Learn how to identify whether an argument is correct or if they're using fallacious reasoning. I think that the things that are in these are so much better than what we've had in the past. And that's why I support these Common Core state standards. I don't want the federal government to have any involvement. And in fact, I would love if you guys all helped us get more signers to get the Federal Department of Ed out of this. But I feel like these standards are the best thing available. And I feel like, and we would have used them regardless of whether the federal government pushed them. And so I'm going to let the teacher give us, but I appreciate your time, and I will be available after to ask questions and stuff.
Michelle has agreed to stay afterwards, so if you'd like to come and visit with her after the meeting's concluded, you have more questions about this, please do. Lori, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. My name is Lori Nielsen, and I am proud to be a teacher. I have taught for the past 19 years at Dunbar Elementary School in South Central Phoenix. Dunbar is in the Phoenix Elementary School District. It's a Title I school. All of the students at Dunbar qualify for federal funding because they live at or below the state poverty line. The majority of students attending Dunbar live across the street in the Matthew Henson projects. The school is predominantly Hispanic and African American, and this of course means that we have many English language learners. I think that's important to remember as I'm talking about the Common Core. Tonight I've been asked to talk about the Common Core state standards and my perspectives and opinions of it as a teacher. As I've been thinking about these newly adopted standards and the PARC test that will eventually replace the Ames test and will assess how well I teach and my students learn the Common Core standards, I can't help but think about all the standardized testing that has taken place in my very classroom since I started my teaching career almost 20 years ago at this same little public school in Phoenix, Arizona. When I first started teaching, I gave the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. It was a nationally normed standardized test that was given in various states. It gave schools, districts, and states a chance to measure learning and compare growth. However, each state was teaching according to their own state's standards. Then in 1996, the Stanford 9 was introduced. This was a multiple choice test given in reading, math, and language arts. It was also used in many schools across the United States. It showed skill scores, national and local percentiles, and how schools across the country compared to each other. Those states taking the Stanford were able to compare scores and measure learning. Each state was still implementing their own state's standards. A couple years later, the Arizona Instrument to Measure Standards, or the AIMS test, was introduced in the 3rd, 5th, and 8th grades. A few years later, AIMS was placed at all grade levels starting in 3rd grade through 8th grade. Second graders continued with the Stanford. When the 3rd grade AIMS was introduced, it was different from the Stanford test because the questions on the test were not all multiple choice. Students also had to respond to short answer questions as well as demonstrate their writing skills in response to a given prompt. Now the 3rd grade AIMS is all multiple choice, and students complete the writing prompt at other grade levels along with a science component. Of course, the AIMS test is a criterion reference test. This means it's aligned with Arizona's state academic standards. The purpose of this assessment is also, of course, to measure students' performance of core subject areas to the state standards at each grade level. Since 2006, most Arizona students have had to pass this test to graduate from high school. Over the years, and along with all of these tests, in order to meet either federal, state, or district requirements, my students have also taken the Terra Nova, the Azella, Galileo, Dibbles, Ames Webb, and Ames Maze. And these are just the tests I can remember giving. Of course, all of these tests are given for various reasons, but my purpose in mentioning all of them is to point out that Arizona is not shy about testing our students. Like other states, we test to compare scores across the nation and at a state and district level. We test to track growth and show deficits. We test the lower grades to see if we're learning our letters, sounds, and sight words, and the second language learners to see how we're progressing in English. And I'm sure there are other reasons I haven't even mentioned or thought of. I look at my testing data to track how my class is doing on the standards. I look at my testing data to track how my class is doing on the standards I have taught and to see where we need some more practice. I also want to be sure that we're all prepared for 4th grade. Now, we have the Common Core state standards and the PARCC test. The PARCC assessment, from my understanding, will be very different than all of the other tests I have just described. First of all, it is supposed to be taken on the computer. Because it is given on the computer, students will also eventually take quarterly assessments to mark growth and show deficits. This will be very helpful for me as a teacher because then I can see where we need more practice and where my instruction needs to be guided before we take the final test at the end of the year. It is not just a multiple choice or in some cases a put your best guess test. Students will be expected to solve problems, find and write their answer, and in some cases explain their thinking. This is very different than just bubbling in answer A, B, C, or D. My 3rd graders will have to learn keyboarding skills just to be able to take the test. At my school, students go to the computer lab daily. However, our time is spent on sites that reinforce reading and math skills. Acquiring keyboarding skills will be a new must. As you know, the Common Core state standards have been adopted by all but 5 states: Alaska, Minnesota, Nebraska, Texas, and Virginia. To my understanding, the biggest difference between our Arizona state standards and the Common Core is that there are less Common Core standards at each grade level to be taught, but the standards I have will be taught at a much deeper level and have to be articulated and understood by my students. It also means that I will be teaching the same 3rd grade standards to my class here in Arizona as my 3rd grade niece is learning in Utah, as well as other 3rd graders across the nation. I believe this is a positive thing. When I go to church, it brings me great comfort to know that I am learning the same doctrine and concepts in my chapel in Mesa as are being taught to my relatives in Utah, California, and New York, as well as other members of the church, not only across the United States, but in other countries around the world. I am not here to tell you that the Common Core standards and the PARCC test are going to solve all of Arizona's drama with standardized testing. But I am going to tell you what I like about them. My school started implementing the Common Core standards last summer. I spent many hours in training, teacher training classes, introducing me to the new standards, their focus, and various strategies I could choose to use in my classroom. I have been transitioning into teaching many of the Common Core standards this past year. I have also been giving Common Core type assignments and quizzes to my students. I just completed a master's degree from NAU and took many classes that discuss the Common Core. This is what I've discovered. The transition to the Common Core standards is not going to be easy, but so far I believe it will be worth it. Developing standards that are shared between states not only helps ensure that students are learning the same things in the same grade levels, but thanks to the internet, teachers across the nation will be able to collaborate and share lessons and advice. I love this. I will be able to access third grade lessons that will be focusing on the same expectations and standards that I'm trying to teach. Also, as families move from state to state, they will be able to expect the same curriculum at each grade level in each school they walk into. Being a teacher in a school with a high mobility rate, this is very helpful. Mostly I enjoy the Common Core because it does not tell me how to teach, but rather it leads my instruction. For sure it is a lot of work as I get to know the new standards and have to redevelop my lessons and instruction to meet the Common Core expectations. But after seeing the difference it has made in my class this year, I believe it's a benefit. I got to personally see how these standards help the learning in my class become more meaningful and in-depth. My students not only had to find the right answers, but they had to be able to explain their thinking and demonstrate how and why they arrived at their answer. They were each responsible for their own work and justifying their own responses. I've taught third grade for 15 years. Among other things, each year my classes learned how to carry numbers when adding, borrow when subtracting, and all of our other multiplication and division facts, 0 through 12. Pretty standard third grade stuff. Now with the Common Core standards, my class gets to use these newly acquired skills at a deeper level. For the first time in my career, my class is expected to learn and apply the commutative, distributive, and associative properties. Pretty exciting for us third graders. We get to solve story problems and decide which strategy would be the most helpful and explain why. I must admit, when I saw the expectations in my summer trainings, I was a bit nervous. I thought, is this a joke? I can barely get through our current expectations. How am I going to be able to get us to this level? But I found as I adjusted my teaching, redefined my focus, and took each lesson just a little bit further, students for the most part met my daily goals. Each day we were expected to verbalize, explain, and where possible, draw what we were thinking. I was surprised at how quickly my students were able to grasp these new concepts and even apply them to other situations. I have found that the Common Core provides rigor and focuses on the way kids think and learn. The standards provide a framework to help us develop our thinking and define our focus. Yes, in the beginning, the complete implementation of the Common Core is going to be rough for both teachers that have to rethink and restructure their curriculum and focus, and students that are asked to do more than just fill in a bubble on a test. I'm excited for the new challenge these standards will demand, and am eager to see the positive effects they're going to have on my students' abilities to think for themselves, be problem solvers, and articulate their own ideas. Thank you.
At this time, is there anybody that, are there any more questions for Michelle or Lori? Okay, we're going to take a few questions, then we're going to turn the balance of the time over to Diane. So, let you round robin this. We're going to take, so, San Martino.
On the Common Core standards, you keep referring to how you can compare to other states. Can you tell me, is the Common Core standards superior to what they're teaching in Finland? Because we live in a global society now, and Finland has consistently ranked #1, whereas the U.S. ranked, I think, number 37. Now, how do the core standards compare to what they're teaching in, or the standards that they have in Finland for their students?
For the benefit of those who weren't able to be here, I'm going to repeat the question into the mic so we capture it on video. His question is, how did the standards apply, or how do they compare with other countries, for example, Finland, who is consistently rated as number 1.
Yeah, but go ahead.
So I will now let them answer the question.
Actually, with the Common Core standards, for some states, it's making the standards much higher. For Arizona, we're reaching further. And so I know that as we develop the Common Core, it levels the playing field. It gets us closer with other countries. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, that's actually one of the goals of the Common Core, was to get us up to that higher level. And they were benchmarked with, the Park assessment is to be benchmarked with some of the national assessments.
We're not there yet. If we compare, if we only compare with ourselves, we're gonna stay at 37. We're never gonna get up to number 1.
Well, right, we currently compare our scores nationally. That's how you know that we're ranked 37th.
Nationally or internationally?
Internationally, that's how, so.
But yeah, that's absolutely right. One of the reasons that we are adopting the Common Core is to make us more competitive to other countries. Absolutely. Go ahead.
We'll go here, then there, and then over here.
Okay, I know a guy who grew up in a foster home.
Let's keep it to asking
I'm gonna
questions.
try to keep it fit.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Riley likes it. But I know a guy who grew up in a foster home who was put up for adoption and bounced around here and there, and graduated from high school at the age of 20 with a D average, and didn't grow up until he got in the military. And whenever he started seeing his friends dying, he wanted to find out what they were dying for. So he read the Constitution, and he ended up getting associate and bachelor's degrees in public health and a bachelor's degree in sociology with an emphasis in criminal justice and pre-law and social work, and a master's degree in psychology, and likes 9 hours now having a master's degree in education. That guy's me, and I didn't have a Common Core, and I'm glad I didn't have someone telling me what I had to think.
Absolutely.
I believe in education, not indoctrination.
We need to we're here to ask questions. Yes, you had a question back here.
Was that a comment or a question?
That was a comment. Please ask questions, because that's what we're here for.
Quick question, the Common Core standards, which may be really excellent, and I've read a few of them, not all of them, but they are privately, corporatively copyrighted, which we want to get the federal government out of our education, but we are not allowed to even change them if Arizona or Mesa or whoever decides that, there's something wrong here. So how, if we were part of writing them, why didn't we just make them ourselves? Why
Okay,
have
so
we given
the
our
question
agency over to somebody
the
else?
question is, how come we're subscribing to something that was established by a private entity as opposed to something that we do ourselves? Okay.
You can't change.
Okay, well, Arizona can't change them on our own. This is meant as a minimum set of standards. I'm gonna read a couple things, and this is straight out of from the standards themselves. The first one is this: by emphasizing required achievements, actually this kind of speaks to one of the things you said. By emphasizing required achievements, the standards leave room for teachers, curriculum developers, and states to determine how those goals should be reached and what additional topics should be addressed. So this is not meant to be curriculum. These are standards. These are minimum standards that are supposed to be met. The other part was, a particular standard was included in the document only when the best available evidence indicated that its mastery was essential for college and career readiness in a 21st century globally competitive society. The standards are intended to be a living work. As new and better evidence emerges, the standards will be revised accordingly. And so I think that really speaks to, by the same committee. So the committee was made up of representatives from each of the states. And as evidence becomes available that something is working better or will work better, then those can be revised at that point. Also, Arizona is allowed to add on to these. We're not required to do only that. We can teach additional topics and do. We don't have just these standards. We have additional standards, and we have always had standards in all our subject areas that we teach. And so this is a minimum requirement, not everything that we are to teach. I'm gonna let you
We're going
decide
to
who's
take
next.
this question back here, and then right here. And then we're going to have, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. We had you. So right here, then here.
If I wanted to get a hold of, say, the high school English curriculum or the math curriculum, how could I do that?
Okay, how do we get a hold of the
The actual
curriculum?
not the
Oh,
standards.
the curriculum.
I want to see the textbooks.
Well,
Pick a school. I mean, I
Right.
live in Mesa. I would go to, can I go
Okay,
to
how do you
school?
get the curriculum for whatever
to see
school?
the actual textbooks. Okay. We have a curriculum department that you could contact at Mesa Public Schools, and they can give you a list of the approved curriculum for each subject title.
Buy the books. Can I come to the school and see the stuff?
That's a good question.
Or-
I would ask them that. I would assume that that would be fine. I don't think they would have any objection to that. You would probably have to come after school hours unless you've have a child on that campus, because there are rules about that. But I don't think that would be a problem.
Okay, Mrs. Ash.
Linda?
Yes, what do we do if we have children who are beyond Common Core? Are there accelerated
Here
classes?
too. Yes.
so
Okay,
that-
so how do we accommodate accelerated students?
While she's finding it in there, that's a very good question. And one of the things that I know about the Common Core, for my class in South Central Phoenix, we're trying to teach to the standards. We haven't gotten beyond the extent of the rigor that's at it right now. But I know for accelerated students, that the depth of understanding that the different skills go to is much higher of an expectation than the current Arizona State standards. For example, in 3rd grade, we've been expected to memorize our multiplication facts. She asked about 3rd grade English, capitals and periods and all of that, and now we're expected to do all of that and know why we're doing it. We're expected to apply it to different situations. We're expected to do it at a deeper level. The instruction is more focused. The kids are better able to, when they take the test, they have to be able to defend their answers. They have to be able to know why they picked the answer, how they arrived at the answer. It's been a pure benefit for my class. I've been intrigued. In fact, the only one that's been stifling my students has been me, because as I've seen the direction that my class has gone with the new focus, my class this year is much, I hate to say it, but we're at a much higher level than we have been in years past.
And this will be the last question.
Let me
for
just read
them.
something. I like to read directly from the standards because I feel like I'm telling you exactly what's in there and there's no room for me misinterpreting what they say. And so I like for you to know exactly what it is in there. Let me just read that real quick. It says, it is also beyond, the standards set grade-specific standards but do not define the intervention methods or materials necessary to support students who are well below or well above grade level expectations. It is also beyond the scope of the standards to define the full range of supports appropriate for English language learners and for students with special needs. So it specifically states these are the standards that are set. And then it says at the same time, all students must have the opportunity to learn and meet the same high standards if they are to access knowledge and skills necessary for their post-school lives. So it specifically says this does not tell you what additional things you need to be doing for either students that are far below or far above. Obviously, there are additional things that need to be done. And the math actually does have accelerated courses defined, and so that students can go all the way through college level math in high school. But the standards are not meant to meet those needs within the districts and within the states. We're meant to do that on our own.
Okay. This will be the last question for this right here. Yes.
Michelle, what are you going to do if you can't get Washington out of this? And John Hooperville has to go back to Washington, D.C. to meet on the testing, and Common Core is based in Washington, D.C. Or you can't get them out, you're just going to have to accept them. You can't get them out of Washington.
Okay, the question is, what can be done to get Washington out of it if the legislation that was mentioned earlier is not passed?
I think it's a fight we are going to be fighting for the rest of our lives, honestly, and have been all along. The way that standards were made originally actually had less input from local school boards and from local administrators. The way they were originally done, or have been done historically, is a group has gotten together like, do you know the names of some of the old curriculum groups? Or the standards groups that have been in the past? Some of these national associations have gone together and written standards, and then states have just adopted those standards regardless. A lot of times they've picked and chosen different pieces of them and decided. So these have been made, standards have historically been made by remote groups and then pulled into the state. This is not a brand new thing. This time, we actually were involved in writing them. We have actually had more input this time than we have had in the past. We have had from Mesa Public Schools, one of our own curriculum developers helped write the math standards.
You had the states involved, but you also had Achieve involved, which is a nonprofit, like it's a private organization. They're based in Washington, D.C. It's Achieve has been involved in this all along. That's not the states.
For 30 years they've
Okay.
been involved, not just recently, for 30 years.
Okay. At this time, we're going to, we appreciate you folks. Thank you so much. They will be staying afterwards to answer additional questions. In the interest of time, we're going to keep moving now. Diane Douglas has traveled from eastern Los Angeles to be here. She's in Peoria. She served on the governing board of the Peoria Unified School District from 2005 to 2012, was board president from 2008 to 2009, and has served on the site councils of Desert Valley Elementary and Ironwood High School, both in the Peoria Unified School District. She's also been a PC, a member at large of CD2, and is currently co-chairman of the Arizona Conservative Educators. We have had a great, lively discussion, and so if you can do your presentation till 15 after, and then we'll take questions after that. Thank you so much.
I will do the best I can.
Thank you, Diane.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for letting me be here tonight. Education is my passion, and do I have a PowerPoint, please? I'm tempted to deviate from my PowerPoint. Can you all hear me? I'm not sure how close I need to be to the mic.
The mic is only for the recording of this, which
Oh,
it will be
okay.
available later on, so you folks can review this as well.
That's not out of my time. I'll use my outdoor voice. I'm tempted to deviate, but I really don't want to. So hopefully we can get some of the points in questions and answers. My presentation is the unconstitutional federal takeover of local education. It should, I'm thinking, be renamed The Emperor's New Clothes. But read that story if you haven't read it in a while. Let me very briefly tell you, because this is much longer than the time I have. I began studying American education back in the 1990s when my daughter went to school. She's 25 years old now. And I had an epiphany moment one evening when she was in second grade at a PTSA meeting. And that was when the principal stood up and said, I don't remember the exact number, it was 75, 80, 85%, some ridiculously high number of the students in 5th through 8th grade made certificate of merit or higher for that marking period. And the crowd went wild and everybody applauded and the parents were very happy and he was the master of the universe. And I sat there and I said, holy cow, they're cooking the books, because 75% of the students cannot be in the top 20 percentile of a body of students unless they're doing something. And that's when I learned about outcome-based education, and all our students have to be exactly equal. So that's where I began. Next slide, please. The purpose of education. Prior to the 1920s, what Americans wanted in education, actually what Americans still want today, what we citizens still want today, is to create knowledgeable, moral citizens and to heighten the human soul in the human being. But in the 1920s, the progressives, led by Carnegie and the Rockefeller Foundation's private funding, came in, and it was to change society. And I have some handouts here and a reading list that you're more than welcome. This is a good part of my education. And they created colleges of education where teachers no longer were experts in their field, but they basically studied the art of education. And then we go to the 1990s to the present. Basically, the plan is to create human capital for industry. So I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you want your children to be knowledgeable, moral citizens, or do you want your children to just be educated enough for the next job that comes along? Next slide, please. Here's an outline of the federal intervention in education, and I won't read through all of it, but there's a couple of salient points in here, and I can't stay. I have another commitment after this, so I'll give you my email and I can send this to you. But 1995, there was an attempt to make national history standards. That's when we took away George Washington and we treated our founding fathers like they were nothing. Well, that was a big splash, and that went down in the Senate, state U.S. Senate, 99-1. And what they learned then was, don't call them national standards, and don't be very vocal and outcoming with what you're doing. Do it stealthy, do it quiet, and get them in while nobody's looking. Well, to that point, our Common Core standards were adopted in June of 2010, almost 3 years ago. How many of you were aware? Next slide. I wish I could go into so much more of this, and I'll gladly come back if you'd like me to. The work began by Achieve, that nonprofit organization, funded mostly by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who had already in, I can't remember what year, either 2004 or 2005, went into an alliance with the United Nations. They put a lot of funding into the Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. This is why we pretend that Arizona was involved. In June of 2010, our unelected State Board of Education adopted the Common Core standards after our elected representatives were out of session. I have here the same month the standards were first published. That's the same month the final standards were published. There was a draft released in March. We don't even know if the draft and the final are in alignment with each other. And almost immediately, schools began rewriting their curriculum. And they said, well, these are standards. They won't change curriculum. Well, I'm here to tell you from my time on the school board, they absolutely have changed the curriculum. We've brought them in line. The textbooks are changing. Everything is changing. These are some of the players. Again, I can email this to people. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to point out a few things about our State Board of Education. It's mandated by our Arizona Constitution. There's 6 defined positions, superintendents, university presidents, etc. But our Constitution specifically says that we are supposed to have 4 lay members. Lay members mean a person who has no specialized or professional knowledge. I could not sit on the State Board of Education in a constitutional definition of the role because I've sat on the school board for the last 8 years. We have, and all members are appointed under the control of the executive branch. Next slide, please. On our State Board of Ed, now 2 of these positions, their term have ended, and I can't find who their replacements are as of when I last looked. The president of the Board of Regents, a former Arizona superintendent of public instruction. The fix is in, folks. The deck is stacked. We have no lay people and those are the people who are supposed to use the common sense smell test. Does this really pass what people want? Next, please, I'm sorry. From Ames to the Common Core standards, again, the emperor's new clothes. Almost immediately upon these standards being developed, the rumbling on education inside was, these Common Core standards, they're great, they're wonderful, they're terrific, they're going to be the end-all, the do-all, they're just going to save everything. And the other rumbling was Ames is lousy, Ames is terrible. Well, the Arizona state standards were developed in the 1990s, about 96, under Lisa Graham Keegan. They were rated among the best. The things that were read to us tonight are the same things that we heard. Phonics has been the law of the land in Arizona education for at least a decade, if not more. So this is nothing new. Do we really not know that first graders, second graders need to know how to read and how to add? Come on, we've known it since I was in school, back in the Iowa Basic Skills Test. So we started this public relations action on Common Core, if you will, and we started very negative press on the Ames test. Now let me tell you, it's the test that drives the standards and drives the curriculum. It can start the other way, and we can say it's going to be the other way, but I don't care how much you write into it or how much you pretend to change it, which we can't because they're copyrighted. We can add 15%. I guarantee you, even if we do, we're not going to test it. You go up and ask your children or your grandchildren's principal, when's the last time they told a teacher, you know what, forget about what's on that test, just go in the classroom and teach. That's what we grade every single school in this state on. These administrators aren't going to forget about it and just say, teach whatever you want. So they were the best, among the best. Common Core Standards, Math, Language, Arts, Science was recently released. We can add 15%. Math and Language Arts, and forgive me, the names escape me right now, but in the Math and Language Arts, two of the, I would call them professors for lack of a better word, education people who were part of developing the standards, quit the committees and basically walked off because the standards were not teaching what they want. In science, while we've been debating and there's evidence to refute global warming since the 1990s, our children will be told global warming is hard and fast science. History, let me sidetrack a little bit here. This is really interesting to me because education reforms itself, as I've studied it and looked at it, every, about 7, 8, 10 years we go, oops, that didn't work so good. Let's try something different. Started who knows when, but most recently we had Goals 2000, which said every child will be proficient by 2000. Oops, that didn't work, so let's come up with No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind said by 2014. Every child, every single child. We're human beings, people. We can't all be the same. But anyway, they start with math and language arts. Actually, they learn, don't start with history, start with math and language arts. So the problem is history and civics never gets developed. That's why we're losing our country, ladies and gentlemen, because we don't teach our children what it means to be an American. And we do it because, thank you. We do it theoretically because we never get around to developing the standards. But we know a lot of these standards were developed in conjunction with UN ideals, UNESCO. The UNESCO IB program, International Baccalaureate, is in a lot of schools. They don't even touch on American history. If it wasn't for our Arizona mandate that it be taught, it wouldn't be there at all. Language arts further de-emphasizes Western civilizations literature, and it stresses a lot of non-fictional information. Well, it's the Western civilization type of literature that develops the soul and the higher level thinking and all this. Reading a trade manual doesn't do it. And when they get into trade books and if they use adolescent literature, unfortunately, some of that stuff is just, quite frankly, almost soft pornography. I could tell you stories about the books I read. When my daughter was in school, I looked at everything she was going to learn. From that night that I went to that PTSA meeting, I never cared what grade she brought home on her report card. I cared what she could prove to me she could do, and I read every single book that she read so that I knew what she was going to be exposed to. Next slide, please. Common Core Standards. They'll move away from the emphasis of biology, physics, chemistry, and kind of shun basic science knowledge. And one of the things they want to get in is what they call interdisciplinary work and global warming and things of the such. But you can't understand those interdisciplinary sciences and work if you don't understand the foundation. If you don't understand earth science, if you don't understand biology, the kids can't, that's why they can't do math, because we don't teach them 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 2 = 3. We have them trying to do higher level math before they have the foundation built. I've heard it time and time and again from algebra teachers. How can I teach these students algebra when they don't even know basic arithmetic? Let's see. Math standards, the estimate from the math professor that was on the board, our math standards Common Core will put our students 2 years behind students in highly achieving countries. And I had a note to the gentleman that asked about Finland. I was reading some more information today. The Common Core standards, ladies and gentlemen, they are not research-based. They have not been tested on anyone. They just came into development. They've not been tested prior to adoption. And the standards and the instructional the instructional methods used are not those that are used by the countries we know are highest scoring in math and science. So why would we want to do that? Next question, the PARCC test. This is, the devil is in the details. We may get the federal government out of the Common Core standards, and I don't believe for 1 minute that we will. But the PARCC test, which everybody's singing the praises on, for the most part hasn't even been developed yet. They have some sample questions, but there's no real test. It's online testing only. It's going to mean a massive investment in technology. And as of last week or the week before, 4 states who tried to do some of this online testing, their systems crashed and their kids were left in a lurch. It was Indiana, Minnesota, I can't remember who else. Another part of the problem, and this started to actually seep in with the Sat-9 when we moved away from the Iowa Skills of Basic Test, was testing was no longer about, can little Johnny or Susie add 1 + 1 and get 2? It became about testing attitudes and beliefs, and I'll deviate just for a moment to tell you a little story about my own daughter. When she was in 3rd grade, that wasn't the chickenpox year, but she was out of school for a period of time. Can't remember why. And her teacher sent home some homework, and this, I made sure she diligently did some homework, and she came to me and she said, Mom, I finished this math paper, but I can't figure out this last question that's on it. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, okay, let's sit down and take a look at it. Now, I admit I'm being a bit facetious here, but just a little bit. It was a word problem. We love to give the kids word problems. It was something to the effect of Johnny and his father go camping, and they take a tent and 2 sleeping bags and 5 cans of beans and 3 pairs of socks and 8 pairs of blue jeans. And the question at the end of it was something to the equivalent of, how did the trees feel about them being in the forest? I mean, this is the type of things. And we're going to be talking with the PARCC test about massive data collection systems. And it's going to be collecting data on your children, on your grandchildren. Some of these tests are asking questions like, what kind of house do you live in? Do you own it? Do you rent it? Do your parents own it? Do you rent it? How many bathrooms do you have? What business of that is the federal government's with a test that's supposed to test content knowledge? The data now, we used to have protection under FERPA, the Educational Rights and Privacy Act, but now where only school districts or the National Center for Education Statistics, places like that, could get their hands on this data. Now schools can name private companies such as Microsoft or Intel or whoever as education partners, and they can have access to the data. And the removal of the FERPA rights that we have is being done by the Department of Ed and the Departments of Labor under unelected regulators. That's what's happening. In Arizona, we recently had House Bill 2425 passed. Don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I'm running a little bit short here. But basically, while the House members were told that it was a bill to, actually the Senate, I beg your pardon, Senate on the floor amendment were told that all it was going to do was tweak an ELL, English Language Learner, task force committee. What it did was take the control out of the hands of the legislature. Now the unelected Board of Ed will determine what test do we use, what does it mean. Our legislators used to debate that on the floor of our elected body. Will it be a graduation requirement? Will it not? Will they take it in 4th grade, 10th grade? Now an unelected board will do that. Next slide, please. What's this going to mean for charter schools, private schools, and homeschooling? everyone will come under this umbrella. The homeschool textbooks are already being rewritten. Pearson is one of the major players in education information. The Arizona universities have already committed to the PARCC test. So ladies and gentlemen, if you choose to homeschool your child or your grandchild's homeschooled and they want to go to college or university, oh, excuse me, they didn't use Common Core standard textbooks, they didn't take the PARCC test. The federal government will be able to close off education and career opportunities through this if we allow it to continue. Next, please. And I've heard many people say to me that, well, in Arizona, we have great parental rights, so we're not going to have a problem with this because we can just opt in or opt out, or we can, make sure we can see the data, the textbooks and things that are being used. And yes, we do. We have Arizona Revised Statute 15102, which says school districts, school boards must, not may, they must have a parent relationship type of partnerships, site councils, things like that. We also have 15113 that gives us the right to review and opt out of objectionable material. The problem with that is, in 2005, the Ninth Circuit Court, under a ruling of Fields v. Palmdale, ruled that parents lose their constitutional right at the schoolhouse door. Now, silly me, I thought our rights as parents were given to us by God, but apparently the government knows better, and we lose those rights at the door. That means, what I believe that will mean, right now, if you go in and you want to opt your child, or your children want to opt your grandchildren out of a class, a district's not going to fight you. They're not going to argue with you about, okay, fine, we'll give them some alternative material. But if I'm a betting woman, and I'm not, and I hope I'm wrong, but I believe that if parents start turning up in mass with Common Core opt-out, first of all, that's the curriculum. What else are they going to give them? But if they start showing up in mass and opting out, then what's going to happen is one of two things. The school district is either going to say, leave, and they're never going to say leave because that child brings in money, or they're going to say, sue us. And if the parents sue us, under the Ninth Circuit ruling of Fields v. Palmdale, the court has already said you can pick which school your child goes to, but you have no rights once you let them walk through the door. The schools can teach them anything they want to. And it won't be, it's already been rejected by the Supreme Court. So unless another circuit has a similar rule, has a similar case, and it ends up going to the Supreme Court, we really don't have a leg to stand on. Once again, I hope I'm wrong on that one. The winners in all of this, the grown-ups and public-private partnerships, follow the money. Microsoft, Intel, they have made huge investments and they will pay off huge in technology. I already saw the Microsoft lobbyists when I was down at the legislature lobbying against HB 2425. I met the Microsoft lobbyists trying to get millions of dollars into the budget that'll go to a Microsoft program. Pearson will need all new test books. All the tests are being rewritten. It's not such a bad deal for the teachers either, because they're going to get stipends to rewrite curriculum. They're going to get professional development salary bumps if they increase their levels of education, and the politics. And another thing, educational organizations such as ASBA, we have an organization in this state, ABEC, the Arizona Business Education Coalition Commission, whatever they are. These are all organizations that many of their boards may serve for free, like the PARCC board, but there are huge salaries in executive director positions and all kinds of staff underneath those. That's a lot of money. When I was in school, I think all they had was the teachers union, maybe ASBA, they probably had that, or whatever my state's school board association was. And we already know from research that has been done, our politicians are taking trips overseas. There's been trips to China. There's been gifts given to some of our politicians from some of these very same organizations who are funding all of this. Next, please. Who are the losers? Our children, our parents' rights, our local control of education, our taxpayers, and America's future, because if we continue down this road, ladies and ladies and gentlemen, we will not be a free America. Ronald Reagan told us, freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. On the same vein, Adolf Hitler said, he alone who owns the youth gains the future. Who are we going to allow to own our children? Last slide, please. The U.S. Constitution, 10th Amendment, says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved for the states respectively and to the people. The education of our children is our business, and the federal government has no role. And thank you. With all due respect to NSBA, I've been there, seen that dog and pony show. I have zero faith that they will get that federal act. I don't even truly believe they support that federal act. What can we do? Be informed. We have AZ Conservative Educators, azedu.org. My email address is dmdouglas@cox.net. I'll answer a few questions, but I regret I have another commitment, so I have to leave shortly after I'm done, but you're more than welcome. dmdouglas@cox.net. You can drop me a note, go to your local school board meetings, talk to your friends and neighbors, and next session, we must demand our legislators repeal HB 2425. We must demand that they put education back under the control of the citizens of Arizona through our elected officials on the school board. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much. We appreciate this. Take 2 or 3 questions and then.
I would love to.
Okay.
I would
We'll
love
take, in courtesy to her, we'll start right here. You'll be the first question. And please ask a question. Don't make a statement.
When I was reading on the cost to the state of Arizona to implement just the technology and the training of the teachers, it's in the billions.
Correct.
Do we have the money?
No.
I don't think we do.
No, we don't. And that's one of the, the question is the technology implementation and the teacher retraining. Why do we need to retrain our teachers? I don't mean to digress. Under No Child Left Behind, every teacher had to become highly qualified in their content area. Why do we need to retrain teachers? If you watched the Masters a week or 2 ago, they had a huge propaganda scheme for Common Core, and they talked about 10 years to retrain teachers in this country to teach math and science. Folks, number one, we don't have 10 years. Number two, if our teachers are highly qualified, why do we need to? They got us into Common Core with the stick and the carrot. We could not apply to Race to the Top federal funding unless we adopted Common Core standards. We couldn't get waivers from No Child Left Behind unless we adopted Common Core standards, basically sight unseen, and that came, I believe the state got about $25 million for that. That will be a drop in the pan to what it will take. We're talking about not only the equipment in the schools for the kids to have to take the test. The schools now want to go to tablets. Can you imagine what a nightmare that'll be? And let me just briefly touch on something else. It's not just a matter of the cost, but it's a matter of we send our young children, kindergartners, first, second graders, third graders, to these tech labs to learn all these computer skills. They need to be writing. There's no cursive instruction in the Common Core standards, at least there was none. So in order, and this is very complex, but in order for the brain to make the connections it needs to make, in order to continue thinking, learning, and doing all the things we want to do, it starts with all the little things we do as babies, and then it goes into printing, and then it goes into cursive. If we just neglect that and plop them in front of a keyboard, I wonder what we're going to see in 20 or 30 years from now. But no, we don't have the money.
Next question.
That's a good question for your representatives when they come up to do their update.
Do we have any other questions?
I think she needs to come back.
Okay.
This may well be a question for Michelle or Lori, I don't know, but I've taught high school, that's where my experience is, seniors particularly. What happens when you don't meet the standards?
We don't know.
Okay. The question was, what happens if the students do not meet the standards?
I don't believe that's been answered yet. In the past, that used to be answered by our state legislature. Under statute, it said if you didn't pass the Ames test, you didn't get a high school diploma. Now the answer to that question is in the hands of the unelected Board of Education. So I guess they'll decide or not.
Teacher figured there's 5 kids in my sophomore English class that is just not getting it. Who am I going to go to say this is not working for my kids?
Okay, so the question was, as a teacher, if there are students that are just flat, if there are students that just flat can't meet the standards, what is the resource that the teacher turns to help those students? Is that the question? Okay.
Well, I would hope that your school district is still going to be there to support you.
If they're not running any of the, if it's federally funded and federally run, you got the man behind the curtain, who do I go to?
Well, the federal government may tell you ostensibly what to do with those. And another thing, and this may be a little cynical, and heaven knows I'm not, but one of the things I'm concerned about with the type of attitude testing and things like that, if hypothetically, theoretically, if your 5 failing students, don't get geometry, but they happen to have the right attitude about, I don't know, global warming or whatever the subject of the day may be, I'm just saying theoretically, that may be good enough. It's not necessarily, I'm convinced, our best and brightest that we will give other opportunities to. It will be the people with the right attitudes.
Okay, we'll take one more question, Dan.
Back in the 60s, when I was being educated, they brought on something called the new math. It pretty much destroyed a generation.
Wasn't that the 70s?
By instituting cognitive thinking concepts before they were ready.
We're doing it now.
When I'm hearing 3rd graders being introduced to the distributive, associative, and transitive axioms, that's nice for algebra, but it's at least 2 years ahead of schedule.
It's the new math.
So we're going to do the same thing we screwed up 40 years ago all over again.
Ladies and gentlemen, nothing is new in education unless you go back pre-1920s. I mean, what happens, and I've seen this through my study, I've seen this firsthand in my daughter's education. Something comes out, and too much of it comes out from this falsified, I don't want to call it research, I would call it study at the master or the doctoral level. Hey, you don't make a name for yourself in education if you're doing what works and you just leave it alone. In my school district, in the Peoria School District, we had a very strong Spalding program. I thank God that my daughter was in that program before they started changing it. We got a new superintendent. All of a sudden, they started sneaking in whole language, which is the old Dick and Jane type of readers that teach sight words rather than phonetic reading instruction. New math. It goes a little bit, and we catch on. So then they just change the name, repackage it, reintroduce it. I was looking at something today online that they started to try to pass out just before my daughter got in school, and it was called, I have the word PowerPoint in my head now, touch point math or something like that. Instead of teaching a kid what a 1 is and what a 2 is, it's touch the point on this and touch the point. I can't believe they're still using that junk. It failed years ago. Block scheduling, the bane of the Peoria School District, in my opinion, as a school board member. Absolutely horrible for high school students to study under. That was junk that came out in the 70s and went away because it was an abject failure. All of a sudden, there's conferences and conventions in the 1990s, and boom, it's back again. It's what they do. They just repackage, and we have to be ever, ever vigilant, because not only are these the futures of our individual children, it is the future of a free America that we're talking about here, in my opinion. My pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry I have to leave, but again, dmdouglas@cox.net. You are more than welcome to drop me a line, and I'd gladly come back.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. We appreciate this. Also would like to acknowledge Butch Bodine of American Legal Video, who filmed this for us. We sure appreciate you, Butch. Thank you so much for doing that. We will make this video available as soon as we can get it uploaded. Okay, so thank you very much. We will now turn the time over to Representatives Olson and Representatives Pierce to come face the music. We'll let them speak for a few minutes and then take any questions from you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate everybody's participation. We'll turn the time over to them.
Okay. Thank you.